and I was going back and forth at home. Wait, hold on. Let me fix a few things on the screen first. Ba, ba, ba. But I usually do my thing. I come on, I immediately go to feed the cats, so that during the at least first hour or so of my stream, they're cool. They're just hanging out, eating and stuff. Once they're all done, then they're copacetic. They sit down in their corners or wherever they might do. It's a lot better of a situation. Um, it's not going to change at all. Today's going to be the same exact thing. However, there's a slight bit more urgency because the one cat has just been following me around. He has understood, like, absolutely, that I feed him in the mornings. Like, it's one of those things that for about 4 days, my wife was like, "Did you feed him this morning? Because I just fed him." And, he's being a certain way. He's being a little different. I'm like, yeah, I did feed him this morning. She's like, he's getting double food because he has his wet food, which is almost exclusive to him. He'll clear out the whole thing, and then he'll have the dry food throughout the day, and then rinse repeat. Today in particular, though, he's just been like absolutely just devouring everything. So the dry food is all gone for both of the cats, and he's just been haunting me. He knows the time is near, so I'm gonna go take care of that. I'll be right back. I also have to put a little bit of tea on. Today is gonna be hopefully a wildly productive day. Let me talk a little bit about the writing side of things besides my slice of life intro that I just gave you. Um, a lot of it, I know who I am. For a couple days now, I've been trying to say I'm going to organize things. I'm going to go this and this and this document, and then fulfill this promise I made to myself to talk about this character, and then set it aside. Blah 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 blah. That it doesn't work for me. Yesterday was proof of that because the day before I went in with that idea, and I ended up with something I was very satisfied with. I was like absolutely over the moon with it. The next day, which would be yesterday for keeping track, I decided to do something for a scenario, a scene, a character. I'm being very nondescript, but it kind of weaves itself through a lot longer of the narrative, and just writing it down just pissed me off. Because unlike the other one where I started off with just an overview, just very, very brief, like, blah, 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 this is the scene, these are a couple new characters that I want to have involved, and this is to explain this situation, and that just turned into a whole page and a half that's an expand, or a page and a half of brevity that will expand into its own chapter when I revisit it in the way I'm doing kind of right now. It's a little bit further down, so I'm not gonna have to worry about it for a minute. But the differences between yesterday and the day before really just kind of slapped me in the face with just whenever I plan something and this is what I should focus on, I can't do it. I can't really get it out in a way that's satisfactory because even though in the end I had about a page worth of just start to finish, this is what I want to have happen more or less with this character, it came off in a way that just reading it over, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And it might just be for now because of the fact that I didn't formulate it into just a very tight story because I couldn't. It's something that it's alluded to. Big part of it is something to do with this, a big scene that I have planned, but then it kind of cools off a little bit, and then it comes in later on. So reading this page and a half that encompasses such a massive part of the story that isn't so much massive in the writing of it, it's massive in the little details that I need to strengthen as I go throughout my narrative. And that pissed me off. That just annoyed me. It kind of felt like work at that point, having to wrap my brain around something that's so important, that I need to do, but I haven't done yet. It seemed like my brain was like, "You really want to do this other thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I want to do this." And it's like, "Shut up, listen to me." And just all night long, I just had that just fuzz inside of my brain of, I'm doing it because I said I was gonna do it, but I don't like it. So is it really worth it? I don't know. I'm gonna look at it again in a couple days and just kind of then roll around what my current thoughts are. In the meantime, I'm keeping it in mind as I start at the very, very beginning of my story and just moving through it. Because right now, that section I wrote with the character that explains a whole bunch of things and intertwines, but it is exclusive to its own chapter I'm preparing for. Um, that was really fun to do. That was really great, and I feel like now that I'm in that mindset of just keep doing it the way I feel comfortable most doing it. If I run into a situation 500 pages in where I'm like, crap, none of this makes sense because of the continuity, then heck, I'll go back in and I'll do my best. I'll see how it goes that way. But as it has flowed thus far, The 5 6 videos I have is basically a culmination of about 3 4 months of just writing, 3 4 months of just figuring out what I want at all. Like it started off with one thing because it was so formulaic, but at least it let me set the groundworks for the world I wanted. It was very Lord of the Rings, very this is just high fantasy something, but I never wanted that to begin with. I never wanted high fantasy. Um, and so, but I was using that as kind of a jumping point to say, look, I have words on the page. Even though it's in this tone I'm not completely satisfied with, I could tool around with that later, and I did. It just happened organically as I created more and more things. I deleted just pages and pages and pages of worth of stuff because it didn't fit all this new stuff that I made, and it was new stuff that was just being just processed very very quickly for me because I was just in that framework. I was in that mindset of like, this is what I want, this is cool, and I'm just gonna do it. So that's all the talking I'm gonna be doing before my beginning bits, which I said, get the cats all set up, set some tea for myself to get going, and then we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll come back down and just jump into it. Maybe I'll tell another story like I'm more apt to do, but we'll see when we get there. But either way, gotta do what I gotta do. Be right back. Ooh, you know what? Get some music going. I don't like jumping into stuff at the middle of a song. You know what I'm talking about? Hold on. Oh, break stuff? That's such a corny, great song. I love it. It's just one of those days when you don't want to wake up. Everything is fucked. Everybody sucks. You don't even know why. But you just justify being like 16 or something. No human contact. But if I hate you right, feel like it's on contract. You best bet this to stay away. I'm going through puberty. Know about the reset. I'll tell you an off-screen story. I was listening to this album with my cousin, who she's very like Spanish music, like soul, hip hop kind of stuff. And I was just in that like one of my friends from school let me burn the CD because that's what you did. And I was listening to it. I was like, it's alright. I was going on a little bit of a help me out trip. She just needed to pick up some stuff. I forgot. I think it was like food for the Goodwill or something like that. And my cousins, that more than anyone else in my life, understand that if something needs to get done and I'm around, I have no plans if you need help. Like, just tell me that you need help and I'm all down for it. So she's like, come on, could you help me do this thing? I'm like, I can, let's go. I think at that point I was, oh my goodness. Well, I mean, when did the album come out? I'm guessing like 98, 99 or something like that. So at that time I was about 15, 16, something like that. In our car, and at that point, my cousin was starting to move from like the just wilding out on the streets and just being that young kid to actually like starting that family life and getting like a good job that she was working at, working hard and stuff like that. And so I put this on, and I don't know, just something in my cousin. It was completely not at all what she really listens to, but there was one song near the end of the album. It was basically like an F you like to my ex kind of song, and she was vibing with it so hard, man. She came on and she was like, "I have a list of people I want to send this song to." I'm like, I'm glad you appreciate it. You don't gotta like it, but as long as you appreciate the value of so. I'm not currently listening to that song, but it is what it is. Here we go. So proof, I'm doing what I'm saying. Look, cat food. That's the best I could do for you is just, tell you it's got to get done, show you that it's got to get done. So here you go. Here's to the one cat, nicknamed Meat Meat, because that's the sound he makes the most. Sorry, go ahead, eat. It's right. Why do you follow me around? Come on. Yeah, you didn't even see it. Come on. Jojo, you don't look hungry. If you do get hungry, oh, are you? Come on. Want to eat? Let's go. Over there. Oh, you are a little bit hungry. Don't yell at me. Not like that, at least. That's such like a nasty man. It's like, hey, man, screw off. But if I start leaving, then you're going to follow me and be like, hey, why aren't you petting me while I'm eating for at least like 30 seconds? So I got to do what I got to do, even if you're in a cranky mood. You okay? Alright, Goblin. So my tea is on its way. I'll be right back. It's a little bit chilly. Let's see if I can fix that a little bit. I'm looking at the happy ground. I can feel it, but I won't let it drag me down all the time. You could kill me, but I'll resurrect. La da 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 da. Yeah. Some tea poured. I didn't set up my milk and or my sugar in my tea bag. I apologize. I got a little distracted. Customary tablespoon of sugar. I shake it out a little bit. It's not like a pure tablespoon. I lied. I said that because I was like shaking it off and it wasn't completely full. But then I like scooped again to get like a better scoop and yeah. Teaspoon. Not gonna back down from that. Oh, I forgot to steep my freaking tea first. The internet's gonna yell at me. That's okay. Later. They may not get over it, but I'll get over it. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. It's a little bit chilly right now in my place because when I was checking on my kid, he has a habit lately of taking the blankets off his bed and just laying in like a little pile on the floor, which is fine. I don't mind that as long as it's comfortable looking. I go in and all the blankets in his pile are not underneath him. They're all just kind of like in a nest like around, and I'm like, that can't be cool, man. Like, let me get you going. Woke him up. Also, he was so sweaty. He had like a couple layers on because he was outside today and he just passed out in them. So I was helping him out, gave him a good change. But during the whole thing, he was so just upset. Like he was just very huckly. Like that's when he was just like, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Normally he is so cute when he wakes up on his own and he just greets the world with giggles and a song, and he's just so fantastic. But if you ever kind of interrupt his sleep, even if it is to move him somewhere more comfortable, he has some very strong feelings about it. So I knew that would happen, but I got him up, immediately got him like changed out, got him a bottle. Look at the two cats in sync eating. And then as soon as he got his bottle, he was already kind of like settled down a little bit and just rubbed his tummy, and he had his bottle and just blanketed him up. That's why I brought the temperature down a little bit so that he could cool down a little bit. He was under some good blankets, and then once it's at a good temperature, then I can regulate it on the heat side. It's still gonna be cool, but it's like a warm 70, like 72, something like that. So he should be okay for the rest of the night. I feel bad about waking him up though. He was so sweet. Yeah, that was a small story about the temperature in my house. Anyway, I'm gonna go see about grabbing my tea. Is there anything else I have left to do? This is such a great song. I might just sing this for a minute before I get started. In my later years, I've definitely cooled off on the Doors, but there was a point in time where like I had like $22 or something, like just from change I found digging through couches and all that stuff. And I was like, I'll buy the best of the Doors. Why not? Basically because, not that I was a major fan at the time especially, but because of the fact that it was just on sale and it was just so many songs for a pretty good price. I could just afford it. Yo, check out the tactics on my tea. Look at this. Ain't that cool? I don't know. If you're like making tea and you don't find stuff like that cool where it like separates but not fully until you mix it, then I don't know, man, slow down a little bit. Things are pretty cool. Just take a look at them. I gotta get a little baby spoon to mix this up with. My lady's like, why do you keep using all the kids' spoons? And I'm like, because he doesn't use them. Because we don't let him, like, we don't help him use them. He just eats with his hands. So, I mean, I want to use them for something. So that's a good point. Thank you. With fields full of grain, I have to see you again and again. Take me, Spanish caravan. That's so cool. No, you can. Mix, 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 mix. That's a small mix. I still got the tea bag in it. And you know what? I'm giving in. Like the other day, like I said, I was trying to be organized. I was gonna try and like get my shit together, and I realized that wasn't working out. So you know what? Fuck it. If squeezing the tea bag makes it bitter or there's a problem with it, meet me in the schoolyard when kids aren't there. Like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then like regulated with like the commission and the local community or something like that. Because you know we gotta make money on it. If I'm gonna get into a fight, there's gonna be a little bit of money made. That way, at the end of it, everyone can go home and just have a good laugh. Millions lost in the sea. I know that treasure is waiting for me. Silver and gold in the mountains of Spain. My mouth is so dry I should drink my tea, or I won't be able to tell stories tonight. If you know the Doors, you know the song. You know what I mean? But anyway, I digress. I listened to that album when like the family went out to dinner, left me at home, Harry Potter style, F that kid. And I was just sitting there in the dark with the sound system all to myself. We lived in like a split residence where it's like a big old-fashioned looking house, but down the middle was like two different houses. You know what I mean? But no one moved in on the other side. It was all like condemned, abandoned and shit. So I could play my shit as I wanted. So I was listening to the Doors, had this old sound system I hooked up. I had like everyone that retired, like a speaker. I collected that shit. So I had like 8 speakers all around, and then I would take the cables for the sound, and I would put multiples in different ones. So 2 speakers were for the left, 2 speakers for the right, because I would like double them up in each one. I don't know. I had some kind of Rain Man moment with audio at that point in my life. Also when I was like 16. Anyway. Cranked it up, listened to the Doors, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. That's about it. I'm not saying I went into like some spiritual kind of situation or anything like that, but I remember it fondly. I remember it just being a nice night. The windows were open, even though it was a nasty area, but you know, everyone was asleep. Cops are out. Wind was blowing in nice and cool, and the music was just going. No one was giving me shit, so that was pretty cool. Like I said, like I keep telling you, this cat over here, the orange boy, he doesn't really like wet food, but once the other cat's star is done, he'll go over and just like start scratching around it and be like, I know he's done, but this is mine. Beta Alpha. It's the second time in my life I've ever said that, and it always applies to you. That is nuclear. That's amazing. So, as I start my book, which I've noticed the last, oh gosh, what is it? Like 5 streams or something like that. I haven't said a single thing about it. Like the literal contents of my book, I have not divulged in any way, shape, or form. I didn't mean for that to be the case. I'm not very cloak and dagger about what I'm writing. I'm not very protective about it or anything like that because, you know, someone ends up stealing 99% of it. Hey, you know what? I still got that 1% that makes me mine. You know what I mean? So it's not too big a deal. So I'll read any of it to anyone that's just very curious about it. But I don't know. At the moment, I find it more productive to just work on it because I know it. So even if I read sentences out loud, it's not the type of thing that I can watch back and say, oh, because I said that, I'm gonna think about this. It's more of like when I'm in the moment reading it, then I'll just make any changes I need to right then and there. Any of when I watch this back, the usefulness in that is more of seeing my train of thought, seeing how I'm kind of presenting myself, see how I'm kind of talking about my book in a passionate way, and kind of where at times that takes me in my conversation because I do kind of very flow of consciousness kind of go with things. That's why I kind of stumble a few times. That's why I lose track of a few times what I'm talking about. However, I don't know that sort of thing when I'm watching that back. It helps. It helps me kind of compile new ideas. That is really really Bernie good. So to talk about my little bit about my story, it's I don't know. There's no rating on it. I'm not gonna say it's for adults. It's for children. It's definitely not for children. Um, More because not that it's something that's like disgusting or like horrible or anything like that. I'm not really getting into that type of like theme for my story. Um, but it is like in terms of realism, the average realism that society could expect. You read the news, like real life society. You read the news, there's going to be these moments of just horrible, horrible things that just, it's painful to read. It makes you just want to exit out of, humanity in its entirety, just move to the moon or something like that. But, those things are just horrible lights surrounded by things that you don't really pay attention to because the bad things really focus your attention. Um, for better or worse. I mean, there's some people that read that and they can kind of still get on. Some people read that and that really takes a toll on them that stuff like that happens. However, I'm not looking to get to that depth of things. I'll talk about things that, are more on the action kind of like, scary, violent side of things. Think more in line of what you might see in a light rated R movie, not something that's going for gross out, but something that's tasteful and they'll cut away in moments where it gets like a little bit too nasty, but you get the idea that it's just a bad situation, like that kind of vibe. Like if I talk about things being mature in my story, it's because maybe there's a situation between adults where adult things are happening, and maybe there might be things that the description of it are more on the violent side, but not necessarily in the gross to the effect that it's making grossed out, but describing things in a mature way to make you uncomfortable appropriately. Hopefully, that's my goal. That's my goal, and that's something that if this does become popular, where people can come in and go back and forth with me, that I can have that dialogue with them about, do you feel that this is appropriate for this level? There could be adjustments as I go through. In the end, I look. One thing I told myself early on is that I don't have any issues with censoring because I feel it's completely acceptable to create different versions of my story. Maybe there's one that's completely rated like super R, where things are just described in its entirety to the nitty gritty to the point where it's going to make you sick and uncomfortable because violent things are happening, bad things are happening, and I need you to understand that in that kind of depth. But taking those things out to give other people a level of my story that's more digestible, more like it's the adventure, it's the community of the characters that I create. That's the things that get you not so much feeling punished when bad things happen, but feeling validated when good things happen. I don't mind creating that version of my story at all, or even like a version that's very kid friendly that takes out all of the adult stuff that's isolated, or describing it in a way that's more appropriate for those levels. I don't mind doing that. That's completely fine. Like I don't know why more people don't do that. But I'm not gonna knock anyone else. That you do what you're gonna do. But you know, being the kind of author that's very acquiesceable to the different types of people that might stumble onto my story, I think is really cool. I think that's really special that, you know, makes me kind of stand out for myself. You know, when I find myself asking myself, why am I writing a story? I come back to the same things that a lot of people might, where you watch something and you might be a somewhat of a fan of it, but you're not all in because there's certain aspects that don't really hold up to your scrutiny. As someone that is receiving this information, that is exposed to this artwork that someone else has created, my personal feelings on that is that whoever is digesting what you've created has every right to say, I like this and I want this changed and I think this should be different. I don't think those people should be shut down. I think that when you culminate what I've created, well, one day maybe if you culminate what I've created, and people can have those differences of opinion, why not cater to everybody? Maybe some people out there that was like, man, I wish that they really focused on, or he really focused in on this section and really drove it home. And I didn't feel like when I read it that that happened. And I looked at all the different versions and it's just not there. Well, if more and more people are in that mindset, what's so wrong with creating a version of my story that says, I hear you, I listen to you? Maybe I'm exposed to too many games from like really good developers that listen to the feedback and they really want to make people happy with their video games. Um, I'm talking about Tynan from RimWorld. I'm talking about the whole crew from the Binding of Isaac. You know, anyone that's ever worked on other properties too, like, you know, the Gundam series, which I'm not a major fan of, but I hear that people that work on it grew up watching it and their whole dream was to work on the franchise, and they get the chance to, and just hearing that story, I'm like, man, that's the cool part of life. That's the part that I want to focus on, and that's what I think would be the normie route. If you're choosing in a video game, like easy, medium, hard, medium difficulty being just about what the creator would like for me, most people to experience, that's kind of where I would like to be with that, you know. And then if I want to swing to the more graphic or to the more, you know, lighthearted side of things, I don't mind creating that version as well. But I need that feedback. I need that, hopefully at some point, enough people to say, this is what I would like from your story, and to listen to them while I'm writing. To keep that in mind. Not to be beholden to them, but to say, you know, there's enough people that feel like there's this thing that they want in their life. What the hell's wrong with giving it to them? What's wrong with saying, you know, you want this type of swing on the story, and other people feel that, or even, oh my gosh, like if this became super popular somehow, some way, and there's this weird minority that, you know, I see pop up from time to time, but it doesn't gain traction. It's just something that, you know, someone says, but they say it with passion. Oh my gosh, what if I could focus on what that person wants, or those groups of people want? That's the kind of thing that I'm like, man, I really want to write more and more and expose it to people so that they can have that kind of input. I think that's cool. I think that's something that's exciting to me. And I'm hurt. It hurts from smiling when I think of maybe that possibility, that slim possibility that other people can be attached to my own work and kind of feed into it in that way. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna drink a little tea. My throat is going raw talking about how excited I am for even like slim possibilities of that. In the end, more than likely, 99.9% with that little bar over it that says it goes on forever, chance that this is just me, my wife, and maybe a few people. Maybe my kid might read it one day, just because I nagged him about it or something like that. And that's the likelihood of this. But even if that's the case, I still think that's kind of cool. I still think it's kind of cool. Anyway, enough sappy stuff. Let me get to just like I said, get into that cool down from working out through the day, get into the mindset of just working on this. So I'm gonna drink a little bit of tea, read this silently, maybe. We'll see how it goes. If I find a part I like, maybe I'll read it out loud. Um, but yeah, let me move forward on this. I already see problems. All right, cool. So in the very second paragraph, the very second, not even a couple hundred words in, there's a grammatical error, and it's so glaring. And at one point, my brain is like, just keep moving on. You know it's there, but just deal with it now. And that's my most comfortable like form of writing. Is just every time I go over it, it's like an onion. Every like just layer I go through it, I gotta do something there. So this is what we're doing. It's such a minor thing too. And I know that my brain was going back and forth with how I want to phrase that sentence, and but now at this current, maybe I'll change it like 10 more times as I keep reading it. But this version of me wants to change it. Oh wait a minute, I could do that. A rickety wooden bookshelf stood against one wall. Its shelves mostly empty except for dust, a few cobwebs, and an old bowl which used to comprise the remains of a fish with no name. Which see that's the that which used to comprise of, which compose, which comprise composed. Okay, I see why even after I fixed it, I'm rereading it and I'm like, I hate it. So that entire sentence is at some future draft going to be completely worked on and then just worked over to make that sound a little better. Basically, there's a dead fish in a bowl. That's what I want to say with this sentence. But the way I've said it is just so wordy. It's so like, to me, wordy means like when you try saying it out loud, it feels like you kind of have to stop, stumble, go back, kind of, how do I say that? Okay, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So, what I'm choosing to do right now, which is the new thing, this is the new thing, is just hit the bold button, make it bold. When I go back over it in some other point in time, then I'll have some moment where I'll sit down and say, hey, dummy, this is how you should have said it to begin with. You made it way more complicated than you meant to, and now it's fixed. But for right now, I don't know how to fix it. I thought I did, and now reading it again, I'm like, I don't. That's not fixing it. That's making it worse. I think. Move on. Also, the part of speech, the will, won't. Yeah, okay. Do I say things are in the present? Do I say things are in the past because it died in the past and I'm referring to when that happened? That's all going to be strengthened as I go through it. But for now, the sentence continues with, it had passed several days ago, though its passing won't be of any great concern. It had lived a good life and died with a full stomach. Why, it would still have had children had it not eaten them as they were born. The whole way that second paragraph is structured is going to be changed. Because as I read more and more and later in my book, I don't talk like that. I think I became very comfortable with how I'm writing it as I go further in. But earlier on, there was a very just whimsical, like just fantasy kind of like sort of writing to it, which is not my intent. It's just that when you first get those words on the page, you need something to push you forward. So I got the idea. And this is not at all how it used to begin. It started with someone just waking up, which is easiest to me because you see that all the time. A story starts with a character awakening into the moment. Maybe they had a dream that guides them forward. Maybe they just open their eyes and it's a zoom in or something like that. And so I found it very comfortable to say, okay, I have a character I want to work with. That's the first character I want to start with. Let's just have them wake up and get into the story so that I can get into the story. Later on, I decided to make a little bit of a buffer before that happens because I think that's better. Like, just in my mind, I see it instead of someone just being shocked into a wakeful state. That didn't make sense for my story. The situation the character wakes up into is a situation to wake up into almost every day. So the idea that it's a bad situation doesn't negate the fact that if you hear something for long enough, your body kind of gets used to it, even if it's a terrible effing thing. Even if it's people screaming and just yelling or police sirens going by or things like that, like, it sucks. But if you hear it all the time, eventually you're just going to sleep through it. So I found it for the nature of the character that it didn't make sense for her to be jolted into a wakeful state because of what's going on. I thought it was cool. So going back and creating a sense of serenity in the scene, just explaining things in a very light way, I found to be more comfortable before jumping to the character that kind of wakes up and it's a groggy. They kind of come around to it, but then all of a sudden they hear what's going on, and then it's just fuck. It's just that I gotta deal with this now, and it's that switch that I feel is very realistic. It's not some kind of like, oh, I'm awake and dang it, I'm mad. It's that like maybe I woke up in a bad into a bad way, but I haven't. It hasn't penetrated yet. Maybe I actually had good dreams before I woke up into that situation. So you're kind of thinking about it, and you're thinking, oh man, that was weird of me to be behaving in that way. I am describing kind of what happens in the scene, but the character kind of wakes up being like, that was a silly dream. That was a weird representation of myself. It was kind of a cute dream, if now thinking about it. But my representation of myself in that dream situation, my dream version of me, that was silly. That's not me. So I thought it was kind of cool to start it in that way, especially for a young person that might be prone to being affected by all the different parts of her wakeful state and having it very like intermixed. She has a very panicked a way about her, which is not at all how she really behaves in the world. And she's dealing with a situation that's just, it's not a situation that she would act in that way. She would be a lot more withdrawn. She would be a lot more calm, a lot more, let me see how I can deal with this situation in a safe way because I'm capable. I know I'm capable because not only have people have told me that, but I've proven it to myself over time. So, you have this character that's just kind of reflecting on this kind of weird state that they were in, and then it clicks of just, this is what I got to deal with, but I'm going to deal with this in this new way that gets me into the next situation and the next situation and moves things forward. So that's how I started my story. For now, at least, that's how I started my story. Am I alluding to something with the description of a happy but dead like goldfish or some kind of fish that ate its children? Probably not. I didn't actually write any of that with any intent going forward. It's just my memories of having fish is that as soon as they're born, they'll eat them. Like as they're coming out, they'll just suck them all up. And so for a young person to be accustomed to that is very nature defining, I think. If you did grow up with just fish that you love, like you love these fish, but all of a sudden you're like, oh yay, this is happening, and then the reality of that, all you could do moving forward is say, that's how they are. Let me try to prevent that situation from, happening in the future. But that's really it. Your brain kind of adjusts to something that a day ago would have been just revolting, just horrible, horrible. But once you go through and you experience it and you realize that's just, they're not even human. You can't affect what they do in a basic way. You can kind of set it up where the little ones have somewhere to escape to as a rational thinking person, but just a core raw nature aspect, there it is. Is that something that I need to really pound in early in my book? No, that has nothing really to do with anything. I think. I mean, just now I spoke very passionately. It sounded like about it, but really, it's just again, like if you've gone through it, you get it. It might be serious the day before, but when you do, you're like, it happens. I'm ready for it. Should it happen again? So I just thought it more whimsical than anything else. Like, a little bit nature defying that this person that we're dealing with right now is used to a certain level of loss that we will be dealing with later, if I'm going to be alluding to anything at all, is that this is a very punishing kind of a world. But through the lens of this character, I am thankful that I have created this character that is very capable. It might be a very dangerous, scary, harsh reality that she lives in, but for reasons unknown to you as we begin our story, she's sure of herself, she's capable, and then you see that, yeah, this is someone that they can handle themselves. Maybe not in a way where they're coming out like standing on top of a mountain being like, look at what I did, but enough that they can protect themselves, they can protect other people, and if it gets bad enough, at least they can make it out more or less okay. So that's the kind of character I was mentally kind of building as I first got into the story, which surprisingly was not at all the character I meant to start with. There are 2 or 3 other characters that to me, make the story. There's one in particular that is my story. This is the character that, this is what I've been thinking of for years and years and years, and a character that I identify with in a lot of my childhood, and just all these stories that I have going through my brain. It just is the backbone of this person. Even though they're very well established, as I created my narrative, I realized that I put myself in a lot of different characters. Not to take away from this one person, but to say that those defining aspects that I find in myself, they do exist in other people, in different levels perhaps, but still, like, just because I walk around and think that, oh, a flower growing in the middle of a harsh neighborhood where things don't really grow all that much. Me personally, in a real life, I look at that and I wanna shed a tear. I wanna be like, fuck, that's awesome. That's really cool. That's really cool that we live in a world where no matter how bad it gets, there's things that are looking to live. I think that's really cool. Even now, I'm like getting all choked up about it. But there's nothing wrong with having other people have different levels of that. To be able to say, hey, I appreciate that. I'm not gonna get all sappy appy like this guy over here, but I can say, oh, you know what, that's cool, and then move on with my life. And just it's a note that says that things are cool, but I'm not letting it affect me in a way that I become all that emotional. So weaving things like that into different people, it became very comfortable for me. It became something that I'm striving towards, to see how I can create characters that have different levels of not just myself and say these are things I feel very strongly about, so they should feel very strongly about. No, not at all. I feel like there should be characters in my own story that challenge the way I personally feel in real life. To just go back and forth with it. There's characters that may feel the opposite of myself, that over time they see a little bit of what I'm talking about, or characters that just, they don't ever come to terms with how I personally feel. I'm getting the hiccups because I'm talking so much. I gotta settle down because I'm so excited talking about just the way I'm like thinking when I'm approaching my book, which, like I said, I haven't really done up till this very moment. I do, like I said, over and over. I watched my videos because it helps me, and that was the one thing I was like, I'm writing a story and I have not talked about it. And even though I'm being super cryptic, secret, vague about it, I think you can kind of feel like I'm serious about this. Like there's parts of it that are emotional to me, not because I want it to be emotional for other people, but because I feel like it's a native thing to almost everybody, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Again, I said like 5 times, I gotta chill out. I gotta chill out because I feel my throat going dry, and I am that person that if I get excited about something, which is very, very easy, I get excited about my own things. I get excited about things that I don't even know about, and as long as someone else is excited about it. If someone comes in, they're like, oh, have you ever heard of this, such and such and such? I'd be like, no, but tell me about it. And if I feel that they're passionate about it, it's not just some BS where they're just copy and pasting, like, oh, this is this thing, why don't you know about it? If they're not being gaslighty about it, I'm all about it. I want to learn those things from that person and see what they're interested in, why it might be interesting to them. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I love this song too. Up in the night, coming from the window, window. It'll all collapse tonight. Full moon is here again, in sickness and in health. So, one thing on my singing I would like to know. I've gone through many years of choir because I felt bad for the teacher and no one was joining choir, and I was like, I don't mind. So, I'll help you out, bro. And then I also have my cousin Lisa, who she sings in church choirs since she was very little, and every time I would go visit the old country, as it were to me, every time I visit the motherland of Jersey City, she was always like, it was usually on a weekend, so I get the most out of it, and she was always going to church and meeting up with people and just becoming better and better. She had like a private tutor, this woman that was like not a million years old, but she was like, to me, I was like a little kid, so she was like early middle-aged woman that just seemed like her absolute love in life was passing on this talent to my cousin, and my cousin was just absorbing it. And it's not radio music. It was very just she sang a lot in Latin and things like that. and different churches would request that she would sing during certain events, and she would sing at people's weddings and things like that. And I thought that was the coolest freaking thing. I thought that was just dope smoke, man. I thought she was absolutely dope for doing that. And even if it was just like when she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do this thing. You're not gonna be bothered if you want to come with me," and that was all I needed. Like my sisters they were rough, man. My sisters were like, get out of my room, stop playing my video games. I hate you, because we're all in that age where they want to have their personal space, and I was always like, I want attention, even if it means just doing whatever I can. They would send me out like in the middle of a blizzard. They would wake me up and be like, just bang my door, shake me, and be like, I need tampons. Go get them. And I wasn't ever like, oh man, like that's gross. Why are you doing it? And I was like 7, 8 years old, living in the sticks with my bike, and then just skateboarding and the bike slipping around and like just falling on the ground. And but they said they needed something, and even if they could do it themselves, even if there's a million reasons why this is probably not something that was my responsibility. They said they needed help, and to me that was more important than anything else. Even if they pick on me, even if they bully me and shit like that, if they came to me for anything, even if it was them taking advantage of me, it was still kind of like, whatever. I don't care. I don't care what their reasons are for doing it. I like being helpful. So they would send me out in the blizzard. But my cousins weren't really like that. My cousins were more like, they wanted me to stick around because they kind of felt bad for me, like being on my own. And I really was helpful. Like they saw that when I wanted to help, that I felt good about it. So they liked that. So I hung out a lot with my cousins. And my cousin Lisa in particular, she would take me onto these recitals. I would just sit there in the corner, just quiet. I never had like little handheld video game systems or anything like that. I would never read a book or anything like that. I would just sit there and just watch what was happening. And just the older woman, and just the way she would correct my cousin and just go over them. And the older woman she was playing the piano, and so I got to sit there and listen to my cousin just work on this beautiful, beautiful music, and this older woman that was just playing this music from like 100, 200 years ago. Like, what am I complaining about? What would I ever have to complain about? Like, I thought that was just the coolest thing. And then every once in a while they would be like, oh, do you want some coffee or something like that? Yo, you guys want some coffee? I'll go make it for you. I know how to make coffee. Where is it? Tell me, what you need, and stuff like that. And then once I was done, I go back to sit in the corner and just watching. Mm. My goodness. Mm. You see, I can't help it, right? Like in conversation, like I even say out loud, I gotta stop talking on like a physical level, because if I don't, I'm gonna lose my voice, and that's gonna only happen after I literally talk so much that I start tasting like metal in my throat. Like, you know what I mean. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. That's I have this like shut up like problem. Sorry about that. Not really, but you know what I mean. And in 48 minutes and circa 20 seconds, I've gone through the first two paragraphs, and I put one, two, three, four, five, six words in bold. And that's it. That's okay. That's okay. You might be like, get to work, you nerd. But the fact is just I'm back to being in a comfortable place. I have written a lot off screen. So just being chill, just being very relaxed, having a bit of a story before I type. Maybe even just for a little, I might, honest to God, I'm sorry. I might really only do like 15 minutes of like actual typing. Or maybe I'll write for like 2 or 3 hours or so. I don't know. For right now, I don't know. I feel okay with taking this slow because I know it's going to get done because I'm excited to do it. Bum 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 bum. What song is that? I'm not gonna tell you. I'll tell you tomorrow. Oh my god, it's so good. I'll tell you tomorrow if I remember, and I'll also go into like a half hour tangent about why it's so good. Let me take that. That's why I will read a little bit. So going beyond the first two paragraphs where I talk about the way the room looks, before I expand that, the paragraph about her fish, important or not, it's just for right now. It is a little bit of detail I just found interesting. So I'll read a little bit the next paragraph after this. This is still so early that even reviewing it or reading it over annoys me because by page like 150, I'm in such a flow with what I'm trying to say and how to say it that I'm it's annoying. It's annoying. But anyway, the room would be an uncomfortable space were Cassandra a bit older and a few inches taller. It was certainly small, with no space for even a window. On the opposite side of the room was a wooden desk covered in ink stains and surrounded by scattered parchment. Her handwriting skills would never be considered an art form, but with time and a little patience with herself, she could both read and write. To be sure, there were words she doesn't know, nor would she recognize, but for 9 years old, she would be seen as clever, if not above average, for never having any formal education. Yeah, that sentence went on a little bit too long, but moving on. Excuse me. Even in the slums, the guild would ensure the education of those who want one. But no matter how the uncles persisted, haunting her for weeks, Cassandra just couldn't accept the responsibility of showing up on a schedule to teach a class on how to fight. So, essentially, just what I'm telling myself more than anyone else, because this isn't really made for Showtime early on. There are sections that are really polished where I read it over and I'm like, I I don't want to add anything. I don't want to change anything. And every time I try getting into it, I'm like, no, don't touch it. There might be a point in time where I get so much further in my narrative where I need to go back. And there's certain things I need to put in these important areas. But for right now, they seem so much better than everywhere else that I'm like, you got other things to work on, brother. You got to work on some other stuff. So just leave this stuff as it is and work on some other stuff. But the intention for early on in the book is getting out the idea that as a young person, she's fairly well educated, but understandably, there's going to be very large gaps in her education. She's going to have a very street smart, rustic kind of education versus a formal education. But you'll see that the community that takes care of these misfits, like brats all over the place, there is a level of society that understands that it is their responsibility to teach certain things. So no matter who they are, whether they're someone that is a little bit more reserved, a little bit more patient, a little bit more um, on the better educated side of things, she's not all drastically different from someone that may not have had that sit down and learn kind of atmosphere, but they would have still have been taught in a very pseudo classical kind of a way, where they'll be taught that there are these things that social mores, more or less, that someone that sat down and taught these things, they may not understand the full depth of these things. Or someone who lives out on the streets that spends more of their time amongst this stuff, they'll understand the way things are to a much better degree. So in the end, for young people in particular, there is a sociological cap on what everybody understands. But there will be differences between the different children, and it's not going to be seen as someone's better than another kid just because she speaks in a certain way better than or different than some other kid. That doesn't mean that she's going to be seen by other kids as like uppity or different or anything like that. It's just going to be, oh, this kid over here was able to just steal this kind of knowledge in this way. Good on them, because I got my own thing that they don't know, and they would be able to recognize that. So there's no kind of Lord of the Flies kind of mindset. in especially the younger society. It is, and even when you do move on to the older groups, you will learn as we go through the story that it is very much because of how much of the world is left, the people that inhabit it, how they're scattered around, and the what's left of old society. You'll learn that they take very the sanctity of being young and young people. Just they take it very seriously, on like a society level. There are going to be aspects of it where someone betrays that kind of mindset, and I don't mean like in real world. You'll have it's such a gross thing to compare it to, but like, that's the best thing I can do is age of consent. Um, it's understood, but when people violate that are on the older level, um, there's all kinds of feelings and social mores depending on where you are, whether that's okay, depending on the age gap. Like, if it's uh, a younger person, but the age gap isn't, it's not really all that great, but it is more than the social norm. There might be a little bit differences there, but in the story, those kind of things aren't as nuanced at all. It is going to be a much more black and white of these are kids, you don't mess with that, to the point where if the adults on the average level see anybody trying to violate that, they're dead. There is no discussion. There is no police force or government body in the world that I'm creating. So the idea of not only do we need to make sure that all these kids live and they reproduce and they become like upstanding like adults, but it's not only important because of those like just core raw aspects of humanity, of we got to keep living. So the more you f with little kids and just try to just mess with them, like, the worse it is, more than it would be in a society in the real world where people make arguments for the ages and the differences and stuff like this to the point where your head would spin. But it's not like that. There are no real world politics in my world for a reason. So yeah, there are groups of people that are especially set up to look out for young people. They can't do it 24/7 because these are just people. They're just living their lives and they're doing their best, and they gotta sleep sometimes. There's not enough people to go around. There's a lot of kids and things like that. But you'll also see how the young people do have the other part of the Lord of the Flies kind of mindset, where it's not, you know, the strongest are the ones to survive. It's we are all coming together as a group because that's what makes us stronger. That kind of aspect of it. So yeah, I thought that was cool, and I thought that was cool. I think the navigating how adults respect the sanctity of being children, and also how children kind of are kind of within themselves on how to raise each other and how to go back and forth, and just how they observe the upright adults around them who are all trying to protect them, how they behave and how they want to reflect that going down. So the idea of the people that are on the wrong side of society is going to be from the top down. There is no discussion. When things are dealt with those types of people, it will be a final kind of dealing. And you will see on both ends of how adults deal with adults who try to step over the line, and you'll see how the children's society, the society of the young people that are amongst themselves, how they deal with older people who try to come in and mess around in what's going on there. I thought that was very cool. I think that dynamic. I am personally, I feel like I'm a good person to go into that kind of a story in a way that doesn't feel like greasy or gross, or just it explicitly like for to evoke a certain kind of emotion at you to make you be like, oh, this is a bad guy, and I really hope the good guys take him out. That it's not at all to have that kind of emotional impact. It's in order for you to say this is the level of the people that we're dealing with, and when there's a rarity, this is how they're dealt with, and you understand why it's a rarity and why it's not something going forward that you'll see as something that you have to worry about. If there's an older person in this town or village or city or slums or whatever it is, and a young person is left in their care, or something's going on and someone is like, oh, come over here and I'll protect you or something like that. By the time you enter into that situation, I don't want the reader or the viewer or wherever to have any doubts in their mind whatsoever that this person would give their life for this child or this young person or whatever the situation might be, as opposed to a lot of other perhaps narratives where someone who you're not all that familiar with, they might be older, dealing with young people, they might be like, hey, I can protect you guys if you just come with me, and you get that kind of like uncomfortable kind of, because you don't know them. Maybe like in the text there was more details there, but when you watch it on a screen or a show or a movie or whatever it is, you just don't have that background, so all you see is all you get, and so you still get that kind of like weird feeling. So having the mindset of how people view each other and how they kind of protect or go against each other is a level of understanding I need to have ironed out. I need people to understand that this is not Earth. This is not the political world that we live in. The reason I can get around that is because the God of my narrative is tangible. She is a very real person that walks around the world that you could talk to, that has opinions, that there's parts of her mind that are in flux like any other like person. There are reasons for why she is God, why I'm calling her that in my story. It's not just a title because she's the most powerful or anything like that. And that deals with why I keep talking about my story actually starting thousands of pages beyond what I've written currently, because there is that kind of groundwork that I'm really looking to drive home in my story about everything has a reason, everything has a purpose. If there's something that I'm explaining to people, I don't want them taking their own personal like sociological backgrounds and applying it to the world that I've created. If they're going to have an opinion, I want their opinion to be based on what they see in my world and whether they personally feel what's happening stands up to what I've given them and the reasons I've put forward. Because otherwise, I feel like as an author, that enters into dangerous territory. That enters into a place where a story becomes something that becomes divisive. That's another reason I was talking about creating different versions of my story, depending on if people find certain interest in parts of it that they want me to make stronger or change or anything like that. I find that fascinating. I find that really, really cool. So anyway, I mean that's just that, more or less top to bottom. That is my whole mindset on that. That's kind of where I'm coming from. That is a little bit about my actual story as how I'm writing it. Um, yeah, that's yeah. For all the streams up till now where I never actually talked about my what I'm writing, I still really haven't. That hasn't changed. The trend is continuing, but I think I at least hope to evoke some kind of or elicit some kind of emotional response to the things I'm talking about and understand how I'm writing and why this is something that I want to do, because I feel very well tuned to it. I feel that if someone listens to me and the way I'm talking about how I want to write my book, call me crazy, but I think some people might be like, that sounds interesting. I would like it if when I'm reading something, I just get absorbed in it and I don't have to worry about the reality of the world around me and applying it to the story. Again, and I'll say this to anybody at any point in my writing, and I think it's something that as much as I talk about and I'm a little bit hesitant, I don't think I'll ever change. I don't see myself ever changing the fact that I refuse to describe people. I don't describe them. I'll describe the clothes. I'll describe maybe the height. That's it. I'll tell you what their ages. Their ages. That's not really just that is a descriptor because you can kind of apply your own. If I say someone's like 77 versus someone's 9 years old, in your mind you could be like, oh, my brain puts a slider on old for this person and it lowers a slider for young for this person. But beyond that, I don't want them being like, Okay, so they have green eyes and blonde hair and there's this color skin and okay, this is that kind of character because I don't think that's important. I think that's dumb. I think that if the person reading wants to or is able to, if I create something interesting enough where they're still with me, they're still reading what I'm writing, they're still going and they're going chapter for chapter and page for page, then I feel like I can respect them enough to allow them to create the character themselves. Maybe they see themselves in certain characters, but if I describe that character as tall, as short, or thin, or heavy set, or anything like that, then all of a sudden they can say, "Oh man, like the personality and certain things they say and certain things really remind me of myself or someone I care about, or maybe someone I lost." And all of a sudden, I describe a certain thing, and it's gone. It's completely gone. Because now all of a sudden, these traits that suddenly happen for this one person simply because of what they're reading on the page is ruined because of the fact that I chose to say your idea of this character is wrong and this is what I want to say they look like. I think that's silly. I think that the idea of working together with the reader to allow them to be interested but also allow them to fill in the gaps with their own imagination, I I think that's so cool. I don't know if I could do that. So far, my wife started page one of being like, I noticed that, and these are my thoughts on it. But by the end, being like, I don't care. I have ideas about these characters, and they have texture in her mind. They're real in her mind, and I don't need to ask her what they look like in her mind because maybe she can't even explain it. Maybe it's just an amorphous feeling that she gets when she reads them, but to her that's cool now all of a sudden. And if I can keep that going, oh man, if I can keep that going, I think that's going to be pretty cool. So that's about it. I think I'm done before I cry on stream. I think that's about it. I'm not doing any writing. I did very very little, but again, I think I owed it to anyone that should ever watch this to at least give you my opinions about the reasons I'm writing, how I'm approaching it, a little bit about the story that I'm writing. Even if I only read a little bit of it, I think you understand more than even if I read half of my story right now. Like if I read even every single page that I've written, I don't think that that would have been as good as what I've said so far in someone understanding what I want to write. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm probably crazy. I'm probably crazy, but that's okay too. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, I'm done. Thanks for popping in. Take it easy.